If we're talking about what are called language skills, I would consider reading the most important skill for any second or foreign language learner for many reasons. One, of course, is what people call reading for learning. That is, you want to learn the language by reading. And you begin with, depending on your age, if you're young enough, you naturally begin with children's literature. And even if you're slightly older and you don't mind reading children's literature, that's the kind of thing that you would benefit from. And gradually the level of complexity and the content being presented to you undergo the transformation that you would expect as you progress from an elementary reader to a more advanced reader. The point I'm trying to make is reading teaches you a whole lot of language, and it certainly is the base for, this is the second reason. Now when I say reading teaches you a lot of language, it could be just the mechanics, the spellings and things like that, the sentence construction and so forth. It could be the nuts and bolts of language, but I see it as a significant feeder skill when you're trying to do some reading and some writing and speaking as well. Let's take speaking first. If your ultimate aim is to be able to speak this language, then you certainly will be benefited by extensive reading. And if this reading includes fiction, for instance, or drama and things like that, there is a lot of embedded speaking in fiction. Characters talk to each other, and drama gives you actually dialogues and scripts and things like that. So you are in fact training yourself to speak by reading stuff which has embedded conversations in it. You don't realize that when you're reading a story with bits of conversations in it, you are actually preparing yourself to speak. But from my own experience as a user of English, I found this to be so very true that when I came to Hyderabad, my encounter with English was largely passive. I read lots of English, essentially fiction then, though now I have stopped reading it. And a little bit of radio listening, not much of listening in those days because the only medium available was radio, and All India Radio concentrated on film music and news and things like that in the regional language, and it was occasionally, maybe once a day, you got to hear a bit of news. And if you're not interested in news, politics, etc., then there was hardly any listening to English that was available to you. So what I had with me was a lot of experience reading English, but I noticed that the moment I had to use some English to communicate with people, either speaking to them or writing, whatever I had to write, I had very little hesitation or, problems, very few problems doing either of those things, because my reading seemed to be, helping me with both these tasks, speaking to people and writing about things, etc., etc. At least vis-a-vis speaking, I believe it's the fiction that helped me, reading fiction, stories, etc. For the reason I mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of embedded conversational English there. With regard to writing, that is even more pertinent, how reading seems to help writing. And I've realized now, it's becoming clearer to me every time I try to write something. The ease with which I can write now, let's say, as when I'm comparing myself to an earlier phase of my use of English, let's say 5 years or 10 years ago, I might have spent a lot more time composing a paragraph than I do now. And I ascribe that solely to the extensive reading I do now. And why? How did that happen? Essentially, I should say I should thank the internet for that, and because of the free availability of online content now, free in every sense. I mean, I don't pay for it except pay the service provider, and free also in the sense of liberal. There's a lot of online reading available now. In either sense, the amount of stuff I read now has grown really in a really significant way compared to the amount of reading I used to do maybe 10 years ago, and I would even say 5 years ago. Because what's happened in the last 5 years, apart from online content being available to me, Sharon, is that these, what is one called them? Aggregating services. There are lots of reading apps and tools available to you which collect articles for you, provided you tell them what kind of things you're interested in. They collect articles for you and alert you to the availability of those articles. Now that my preferences have been codified, and the kind of material I'm interested in keeps coming to my mailbox, I see that I spend a whole lot of time reading stuff. So both the availability of online material and the availability of stuff that I'm specifically interested in, both these things seem to have led to this exponential growth in the amount of stuff I read. That, I have absolutely no doubt, helps me considerably with my writing, whatever writing I have to do. Currently, most of the writing is, in the form of notes I prepare not for my teaching itself, but for my students. So it's not as if when I say notes, I mean bulleted points. What I mean is actual connected writing that I put in the Dropbox and things like that. And the emails I write related to the teaching I do, a whole lot of writing of that kind, and indeed some administrative writing, answering letters and writing letters to other people at this institution, etc. Whatever be the kind of writing, I seem to have much less difficulty with my writing now as, let's say, 5 years ago, before these reading services came into my life.
So I'll just pause it for a minute. 8 minutes.